All right. Hello, my name is Kaylee, and I'm going to start my virtual presentation on my project, which is called Vocabulary in Context. So, the goal of this project was to help students learn a couple different kinds of skills. One of the main one being how to infer what an unfamiliar vocabulary word means, but not only to infer that meaning, but then to add that to their own vocabulary that they then use in writing. So it's several different objectives that I tried to pull together into one unit. And I think I did it pretty cohesively, but let me go ahead and show you. So the performance issue was really that there's a gap between the types of testing that we use and the skills that we teach. So the Tennessee Comprehensive Assessment Program, that's our standardized testing format. It has a TCAP multiple choice section, and then it has TCAP writing. So the multiple choice is a lot of context clues, infer the definition, the synonym, the antonym, and identify what this word means in the context of the passage. What does this word add to the passage? But they're all multiple choice answers. And then there's a big jump from that, which is very, selected response to TCAP writing, where they're expected to utilize a wide and specific vocabulary in their writing. So my goal with this unit was to bridge that gap. So how can students attain mastery of new vocabulary words? Because a lot of our students are scoring really well for the multiple choice section, but then they're getting lower scores on writing. And looking at their writing samples, the ELA teachers do not feel like it really represents their breadth of knowledge and vocabulary. So trying to bridge that gap between what students are able to accomplish in selected response versus in writing assessments. So some of the goals for this project, these are the goals that I had in rank order. Students will, within a reasonable degree of accuracy, infer the meaning of unknown vocabulary words. This is number one because it's really the basis of all of the other goals. Students will employ a wide range of at or above grade level vocabulary to write descriptively and creatively. Students will apply knowledge of formatting and transition words to craft organized, cohesive narratives, arguments, and informative writing. And finally, students will check and revise grammar and language conventions to clarify their writing. These meet the Tennessee academic standards of analyzing what a text says explicitly, drawing logical inferences, citing text evidence, determining the meaning of words when in the context that they're used in, and explaining how they add to the text as a whole, and using technology, including the internet, to produce and publish writing. I used a mix of procedural skills here, both writing on Post-it notes and papers with pencils, some gamified learning, and online formats, because middle school and sixth grade especially is really when they take that step from elementary, which is very paper-based, and then by the time they're in high school, pretty much everything is on the computer. So my goal with this unit was to also bridge that gap in procedural skills. So a little bit about the learners. I was using my homeroom kind of as the sample of learners I was thinking about when I was creating this unit. There's 25 students. There's a variety of accommodations in that class. The initial writing screeners showed like a very strong work ethic, I would say. There's a commitment to detail and development. And it's just that they need to really widen their vocabulary. But I think they will use those words once they feel confident in a new set of vocabulary. And of course, many struggles with conventions. I think since COVID, this has just been a common refrain for ELA teachers is that the fluency with conventions has gone down quite a lot. So I'm hoping that this unit will support that as well. In terms of the school where I work, it is a giant school. We're the second biggest middle school in Tennessee. It is a fringe rural community, rapidly growing, rapidly diversifying. The general atmosphere is pretty positive and supportive. I would say most students want to learn who are there. They want to be involved, to be in clubs, to be in sports, to be in academics. So it's generally a pretty positive atmosphere. The objectives for this unit, and there are 5, and I did keep all 5 because I think I was able to integrate all of them in the projects together. The first 3 are about conceptual knowledge. Objective 4 is about a growth mindset. So kind of integrating SEL with this unit. In my school currently, we have a separate SEL class. And while I like doing that, I think if it's going to be really effective, I would like to incorporate it more throughout all of ELA as well. So objective 4 is about the SEL skills, the growth mindset. And then objective 5 is the procedural skills of using technology and paper and pencil as well. So in terms of the sequencing, I have this divided into 8 modules. And I said module instead of class because I want to be a little more flexible with how it works. And it might be that one module gets spread out over multiple classes. It really just depends on the student body. And I wanted the sequencing to be adaptable to whatever is happening in the classroom. So that's why I said modules instead of classes for this. For the first objective, there will be an initial presentation of modeling, and then I will have them think, pair, share together, draw pictures, diagram, and really try to visualize conceptual knowledge. Because one of the things that we learned in the reading was that with concepts, it's important to try to visualize it if they are concrete concepts and to discuss it if it's an abstract concept. So I think, pair, share is a really good strategy for that. Our next unit will talk about growth mindset, bringing that in early. And I think the story of the tortoise and the hare, it's, really common, but it's really fitting not only for the idea of a growth mindset, but for our animal allies unit as well. So it kind of ties in our SEL themes and our theme unit, our unit theme, and our narrative focus as well. And then they will talk at their table about having a growth mindset at school. And then for our next module, we're going to introduce the idea of morphemes and root words. And this can get pretty complex pretty quick. And something that I'm trying to be wary of is like false positives. So for example, a is a prefix. If you say like amoral or apathetic, it's like it's saying this is not that thing, right? But I don't want students to think that like, since A is the first letter, it could be something like anaconda or alphabet, and that means not something else. So that's something I'm trying to be wary of, which is why I chose categories, because students can think of a lot of different options for this generative strategy, and then we can eliminate the false positives as well. So that's kind of what I'm looking for with categories as an example. And then, of course, think, pair, share to discuss, think about how they can integrate it into their vocabulary as a whole. And then for the next module, we're going to start working on those procedural skills of thinking, like, what is the easiest context clues method for them? And then for module 4, we're going to jump into the different like inference methods of context clues. So that's definition, synonym, antonym, root words. So students have a lot of different things they could use when they're reading. And this might sound like a lot of different methods to teach at once, but it's something that if you have strong reading comprehension, you do naturally. And so this is something that I'm really trying to get specific with. And for module 5, we're going to start really diving into the procedural skills objective of note taking, of transitioning notes on paper and pencil into Google Suite to share their ideas. And of course, we'll tie that into a growth mindset as well, with just a quick, simple reflection on their novel and how things might go differently if characters have a growth mindset or don't have a growth mindset. And then for module 7, we're going to jump into a graphic organizer where students are going to start categorizing. I'm hoping this is a nice change of pace for a generative strategy that isn't just discussing or writing, but where students start to kind of identify this is a synonym context clue, this is an antonym context clue, this is a definition context clue. And then finally, we have our summative performance assessment, where students will use all 5 objectives, show a growth mindset, use procedural skills of note-taking and sharing ideas on the internet, and show their knowledge of inferring vocabulary, and then explain how that vocabulary word is important for their novel as a whole. So this is my first prototype that I'm using in this unit. I'm going to use this as a pre-assessment to understand what students know about context clues, and there's a little hint here at the top. And then also as a post-instruction assessment to understand what they learned. I was thinking about using vocabulary.com at first because it's something that we'll be using throughout the unit for students to practice seeing vocabulary in a ton of different contexts. However, vocabulary.com doesn't have the same affordances that Schoology does in terms of analyzing data. So I decided to use Schoology instead. And vocabulary.com is a little bit like Kahoot in that it sort of incentivizes students to click fast. And I really want them to slow down and read the elaborative feedback. So I think I'm going to use it in a different setting than for the pre-assessment. So we're using Schoology for the pre-assessment. For my second prototype, this is vocabulary.com. This is going to give them elaborative feedback, and I'm going to really encourage them to slow down and read the feedback. And it mimics the concept attainment model because it has a ton of different examples. So I'm really hoping this is a way, just through repetition, for them to experience a lot of different contexts for new vocabulary. It also has a feature very similar to Kahoot where they can join a vocabulary jam and compete against each other and compete against other schools. So I'm going to use that as a sort of reward at the end of class to kind of build morale and things like that. Finally, my third prototype, this is the performance assessment. So students are going to be assigned a Animal Allies novel, either Where the Red Fern Grows, or Chomp, or Because of Winn-Dixie, or The War That Saved My Life. And as they're reading, they have to find 3 new vocabulary words per week and explain it like in the student example in this column. So they find text evidence where the vocabulary word is used, they explain the meaning in their own words, and then they explain why this word was used in the story. What does it add to the story as a whole? So they're going to do that with 3 different words each week. And the goal is to really encourage them to not only infer what the meaning of the word is, but to add it to their vocabulary. So thinking about why did the author choose this word will stimulate how can I use this word to add to my own writing. So that is our last prototype. That is the performance assessment. There's a lot of different ways this could be extended or applied. One of the things I really love about performance assessment is it can be modified so easily for students who don't have enough time or have learning challenges. I can just keep it to 2 columns instead of 3, 2 new vocabulary words, or ask for less commentary. Or I could ask for more simultaneously, ask for more explanation. Why was this word used? What does it add? How can I use it in my own writing? So that's something I really like about performance assessments. And then it can also be used in multiple choice context clues questions. So I think it will be really helpful not only in looking at writing assessments, but also in standardized testing to see what is the transfer here? How do these skills work in both kinds of assessment? And then, of course, there's a section on TCAP about detail and development. And it'll make their vocabulary very specific for informative and argumentative essays, which is really what I'm looking for, and more creative in narrative essays. And of course, it will support reading comprehension. The more vocabulary students know, the less the cognitive load is that they have to deal with while they're reading. So I'm hoping that this can be applied pretty easily. All right. Thank you so much for listening.